with us here in the Institute this morning. It's a great pleasure, and it's been a while waiting for the event to come. I suppose first instance, I want to welcome everyone that's coming on board with us this morning. It's part of the masterclass series and fireside chats that we've been doing over the last 2 years during the pandemic. And at the outset of the pandemic, back in March 2020, we recognized that we were, as with every other organization, going to have to pivot. And the Institute, like all good management consultants, recognized the future, and we pivoted to the virtual model. And I suppose just to give you a little bit of background, the Institute of Management Consultants and Advisors here in Ireland is part of the global family, and we are the professional institute for the management consulting profession here in Ireland, and we accredit and manage the members. We've got quite a broad cohort split between, I suppose, 4 different styles of consulting. You've got the big practices that you'd be familiar with, the big 5. You've got the medium-sized organizations, which are spread throughout the country, generally speaking. And then you have the small uber niche consultants, which I guess to a certain extent you may be falling into that category yourself now, Ivan, in the most recent evolution. And we'll talk about that in a little while in terms of your own career trajectory. And our 4th cohort, which we're delighted to have with us, is our academic cohort. And we would have 29 accredited master's MSc level courses spread throughout the country in terms of DCU, UCD, Trinity, NUIG, UCC, and so forth, a literal cornucopia of TLAs. And we've got about 700 students accredited through that. And so we've got quite a big cohort of people. And within that context, we offer them accreditation and ensure that standards are maintained. And we also reciprocally give them accreditation if they're over in the UK, for example, or we would have about 300 members over in the States at the moment in Canada. And we have, even this morning, we have members coming in from the subcontinent, I see India and China and right across the globe. So these mornings have gone global, which is interesting. You being from Wexford, me being from Mayo, we've been in Dublin. So we are collectively global this morning, which is quite interesting. And as I say, we're delighted to have you here with us. And if anyone is interested in joining the Institute, please feel free to come on board and contact us at admin@imca.ie. So again, I would just ask everyone to make sure they're muted, and we'll have some questions and answers at the end, if that's okay, and we look forward to that. So Ivan, I suppose at the outset, maybe you need no introduction as the famous things go, and people will be more than aware of your, I suppose, your career trajectory as both a TD and a business owner, and also more recently as a consultant in communications, and obviously as a broadcaster. So you have a broad spectrum. We were chatting earlier that you know, people say resilience is a key skill set in terms of attributes that people would like us in the management consulting profession and so on. But I suspect maybe that whole kind of element of being able to reinvent yourself is equally as strong a skill set and a suite of skills. And you're a great exponent of that particular attribute. And maybe just for the audience that are at the list this morning, you could maybe give us an insight into where you are at the moment in terms of your most recent evolution and why we're having a chat this morning, because you're going to talk to us about managing your personal narrative, which is something that we're all very keenly aware of in terms of reputation and from both a corporate and a personal point of view. And you have unique insights across the spectre of different organizations that you've worked with and to and from, and the entities that you run, and have had the ups and downs and slings and arrows that we all suffer during the course of our careers. So maybe just take it out.
Well, my latest incarnation is Media Masterclass. And what happened was I had a really successful political career from councillor to the cabinet table. I had a business, Celtic Bookmakers, that went from £3 a week in Tramore to 190 million, and didn't sell it in time and went through the whole PG and bankruptcy thing. And then from 2009 to 2020, I worked full-time in the media, on news talk in the commercial independent sector, TV3, Virgin Media, columnist with the Independent and the Examiner and so on. And basically, lockdown obliterated all my event-related business. moderating conferences and seeing award ceremonies and so on. So I thought, okay, I'm 61. What am I going to do for my next maneuver? Living in Enniscorthy, because I moved out of Dublin to do it, and I was bored out of my tree. So I wrote 18,000 words of everything I ever learned, asking and answering questions, poacher and gamekeeper, and in a really deep dive of everything from, okay, so tell me about your content, Pat, in the Institute. Why should I engage with it? How is it relatable? And if you've got the conveyor belt of news every morning, every evening, how can I kind of inveigle and crowbar my way into people being aware of what I do? So the first part of the module in this media masterclass, which is a one-day session, and I should just say I teamed up with iQuest.
Okay.
Because I didn't want to set up my own brass plate, my own thing, whereas really I was passionate about having a boot camp, trying to mentor you, to be, if I was to sum up what I now do is I'm a communications coach. I want to make you your own best PR person.
Surely a consultant.
Well, put it like this.
It
is, of course, or trainer or whatever you like.
I guess.
Well, no, it's based on the individual. In other words, I'm not going to write your communication strategy. I'm not going to write your social media or press release. What I am going to do is make you, Pat, be your own best PR person. I will give you the competence and the confidence to walk onto the Claire Byrne show, to do whatever you need to do, the Late Late show, because you actually are so on message and on point. So the course is a deep dive into, well, what exactly is your USP? For whom do you add value? So if you're making widgets, or you're running a charity, or you're a Garda superintendent, or a director of services in a local authority, or running a hospital, you have to engage with the media, either on the defensive or on the promotion side. So basically, what I want to do is not be like a PR firm of giving you a retainer. I want you to come to the masterclass, and then we'll do a follow-up one-to-one interview on the topics of your choice. So we teamed up with iQuest, and we set up this in basically early September. So I've done 10 courses, and it's gone really well. And we have 10 more booked out. And it's so the amazing thing is, people said to me, it would never work having a CEO of a big PLC in the same room as a CEO of a state Quango, not a company, not commercial at all, with a CEO of a charity,
yes,
or someone who would set up their own entrepreneurial business with plant food and who wanted to become a Pat McDonough or a Fergal Quinn, whereby they themselves embodied the commercial store. So the reason I was so interested in management consultants and advisors was that if you have a client for which the solution is not to cut costs, not to put in new tech, not to be more productive, but just to grow your revenue. My whole central point on a commercial side is that if you take out an advert, a Google ad or whatever, you will have 40 times more impact if you're actually telling the story about the IMCA than if you're actually, kind of just advertising. And so therefore, what I coach people, what I consult people is, okay, how we can give you content that is engaging. In other words, I know how producers and editors and researchers think. I know what they want to fill their 2-3 hour program. And therefore, the first thing I do is a deep dive into making it relatable, making it engaging, so it's not a snore fest. And how, okay, that's interesting, I didn't know that, and how it relates to Mrs. Murphy, mother of 3 and Tal. And so whether it's B2B or B2C, I can actually, you end up having gone through the course. So there's an element of detail insofar as when the red light goes on, what you should do with your eyebrows, your eyes, your smile, your hand gestures, and all that kind of thing. Or you should sit in the chair, how all the body language. Then maybe you have really complex thing to get across and you lose your concentration. What's really happening there? You're talking, all the oxygen is going out of your mouth. There's no oxygen getting into your brain. And then you have a brain freeze. So I'll teach you how to breathe. And so that level of detail. 2, you're going into the green room, and maybe you're having a row with someone else who has a completely different view on remote working, how you should handle yourself in the green room. And so all of that's the second module, just the performance element of it.
Okay.
Having got your message straight, how you actually comport yourself, and you know what to do during the ad break with Matt Cooper, and all of that kind of minute detail. And then we deal with an entirely separate area, the third module, which is the roof has literally fallen in. You've gone bankrupt. There's fraud in the company. Just this has not worked out according to plan. How you defend yourself, and I go through a deep dive into that because it's more than the media you've got to deal with there. And then finally, nobody's heard of Pat Downs. How do I get you to be a household name? To build your profile, to build your reputation, who you need to give the bottle of wine to at Christmas, when you need to say no, and basically how to build relationships in the media.
Okay, super. And how do we contact you?
Well, it's all on the website mediamasterclass.ie.
Okay.
And essentially we're actually finding now, because we have a marketing team on it, that it's actually referral now, because the thing that pleases me most, say 150 people have been through the course, it's actually, this is going to live or die by referral, and people, hardened individuals, right, who thought they knew all about managing companies, just say they've been blown away by it, because it's a bit of a boot camp, me for 7 hours.
And how many people on a cohort?
It's a maximum of 12.
That's excellent.
A maximum of 12. Yeah. So say you're in a charity, or say you're in a business or whatever, or a state entity, the one-to-one is absolutely bespoke. So a lot of what I do on the course is applicable, but we have question answer. So tell me, what was the worst thing that ever happened to you in your life? How did you defend yourself? How did you come through it? Or tell me, what is it that you're trying to sell, and to whom? You know what I mean? So, but basically, my central pitch this morning is that if a management consultant advisor has a client, right, that needs to grow revenue, I think I can get you free marketing with 40 times the impact of a Google ad.
Okay, well, that's a big claim now.
Okay.
So let's be specific here in fairness, and put our colours to the mast. Let's nail them. So if, for example, a management consultant practice of the Institute is looking to leverage free, if we use that awful term, free access to the media and make it impactful, on a step-by-step basis, on a snapshot, how would they go about that?
Well, first of all, one of the things that's really happened over the last 20 years is that the media have gone broke. Okay, so leaving aside public funding, 80%, up to 80% of all advertising, so newspaper circulation has gone down, all advertising is now gone digital. It actually, so if you go to Core or any of the Carrot or any of the big advertising agencies, so the media are broke. That means they have less researchers, less producers, and less editors. There isn't less airtime. So what you need to do is, you have an expertise on anything. It can be making widgets, it can be advising people on Excel, or whatever it might be. And what you do is you help the program makers solve their problem. So the first thing you might do is say to a newspaper, I'll tell you what, I'll write 800 words on a particular topic. So we'll just take something off the top of my head like Brexit. What is the Northern Ireland Protocol about? What is Article 16 about? Just use, I could have picked any example. So what you do is you put together 800 words where you really get down to the kernel of the issue. The issue is, will they accept the ultimate ECJ ruling on something? And you explain it. And then suddenly, who consumes the most media? The producers and the researchers of the radio program. So you've done this in the Sunday Business Post, or the Business Post as it is now, and someone reads that on a Monday and say, we'll get that Pat Downs guy in to talk about. That's one way of doing it. So you actually do stuff for free. Secondly, you have an expertise.
How do you contact them to offer it? What's the segue?
Oh, no, it was simply, absolutely, a cold call. You could say, look, this is my background. Okay. I'm an expert in this area. I just thought I'd send you over this thing. I've sent a newsletter to my members or my clients, and so just thought you might be interested in this or whatever. And so you're doing it without any absolute
for the greater good.
So no, but you're actually developing, you become the expert. So if you're a chemist, you can become an expert on preventative health. You can on diagnostics, and you can be on local radio then. We'll talk to you about warts today. We'll talk to you about vaccines tomorrow. We'll talk to you about your foot care or whatever. If you're in property, right? You can have on your books, like I had someone on the course and they said to me, I said, you know, how are you going to sell yourself? And I said, do you have any property porn? I said, the media love property porn. He said, well, we do have this house that was bought by the lead singer of Simply Red. And it's looking out into the ocean and he spent a fortune on it and he's never used it. And we're now selling it. I said, that's a brilliant story. I said, I guarantee you Highland Radio will be interested in that story. In fact, I think national. So you go into exactly what the sea spray looks like and the stunning nature of it and the views and the vista and the relaxation and so on. And then secondly, now that we've got to know you, Pat, let's just tell us the difference between property prices in daft.ie nationally and Donegal, or is it holiday homes? And then suddenly the issue of mortgages and affordability comes up. You know what I mean, in terms of housing, you know, the 3.5 times. Yeah, exactly. And so therefore you become, hey, we've a quiet Monday, we'll ring Pat here to talk about property. And in other words, once you become a friend of the show, you know what I mean, you are the expert. So what I'm saying is this, take your expertise, bottle it, distill it, and actually then see how you can interact. So you've got to get your target audience, find the media that's most adjacent to that, and actually be on message. And you actually start by creating it. Because what happens with the media is, we were hoping to get the Minister for Brexit in, but unfortunately he's dropped out at the last minute. But here to tell us all about this in layman's tongue is Pat Downs, who's now going to explain this all to us. So that is one of the ways you can do it. But it's amazing the domino effect. If you do one interview, the biggest consumer of media are media people, and they will see it. And therefore, you know, and then if you get proficient at doing all the content, in other words, okay, so how can I make anything relatable? You know, we'll take, you know, the big issue at the moment is inflation, right?
Sure, yeah.
The cost of living increase. Right, well, first of all, you know, how can I say something interesting about this? And, you know, so energy prices is an issue. And then when you deep dive into it and talk to environmentalists, what's actually happened was someone woke up one morning and said, we can have no more investment in oil and gas exploration. This is a good start. So that's fine. Demand for energy and electricity has shot up, but it takes maybe 5 years to develop a wind farm, a solar farm, or something like that. So we've actually now a crux that the renewables aren't in place and there's a shortage of energy, leaving aside Ukraine. And that's really interesting. So how are we going to deal with that? So that is an issue that, and secondly, perhaps with quantitative easing, anytime someone decided to print the lira or the Deutschmark, asset values went up and money went up. So what I'm saying is now, actually, this inflation is not going to be solved with a Band-Aid. This actually is a fundamental thing that's going to be a new economic cycle that's going to last for 3 years.
Okay, Ivan, so that's your segue in. So just on the hierarchy of prestige in terms of media, for example, so you have the print media and you have the TV and you've got the radio.
And you've digital now. You can do your own content.
We'll come on to digital in a second as we're on a digital
platform. Yes, that's okay.
So, but if we look at the three in the hierarchy, I'm assuming TV is at the top end of the hierarchy in terms of exposure and so on. Maybe I'm wrong.
No, well, I'll put it like this. There are very detailed radio JNLR figures, which are somewhat accurate. When I was presenting the Tonight Show, I would actually get the next day a minute per minute. So if you had an ad break, it would go right down. If you had a really knocking it out of the park guest, it would go up. And sorry, let me tell you the way producers think. And this is why Ryanair is such a success. All drama can be summed up in one word: conflict. You take Ryanair.
If it leads, it leads.
Exactly, absolutely. So fighting with airports, fighting with pilots, fighting with fuel suppliers, fighting with baggage handlers, fighting with travel agents. What's the consistent message? A, lovely, there's a row on, and so on, but all the benefits means you can fly to wherever for €9. In other words, that is a consistent message. So I also teach you, once you've got a bit of a reputation, actually, the clever way. So when I was launching Media Masterclass, you know, people say, okay, that's what Ivan's at now. When a particular journalist or one of the tabloids ran me. He said, by the way, what advice do you give about going on Liveline? And I said, well, actually, fundamental to a crisis is you can't run away. You've got to embrace the media. But as it happens, Ken, I advise you not to go on Lifeline. It's a vent machine. It's not a place to get a complex thing. So anyway, the journalist goes rings Joe Duffy.
Yeah.
And he's saying, what do you make of that? So Joe said, everyone should demand their 1,500 euros back for going on the course. And so next thing, the journalist got back onto me, and I said, well, I said, if I was trying to defend a 500 grand a year salary, I wouldn't be going on Lifeline. I wouldn't advise the client to do that. And secondly, now that I think of it, the kind of Jerry Springer, confrontational media, that's what Liveline's really about. So in other words, I doubled down. So now 3 tabloids put on their front page, there's no show like an Ivan and Joe show. In other words, that was conflict, and Joe didn't come back for second helpings. So that actually allowed me. So what's this story about? Why is Ivan on about this? And so on. And therefore, what I'm trying to say is sometimes you've got to seize an opportunity where someone's giving out about your product or service to actually double down on it, because the conflict will get more coverage.
Okay, so I've been going back in good traditional kind of questioning mode.
Yeah.
To the question in terms of the hierarchy of the 3.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Yes. So basically, I'm in favor of relentless repetition. It's not just one interjection, unless you have a meltdown somewhere. So one feeds off the other. If you do a written piece, someone who's actually in a senior editorial role will see it, and I absolutely think
that's your first building block.
No, sorry. Your first building block is to pick up the phone to say to a researcher, I'm an expert in this. If anything comes up on insurance, you give me a call.
Okay.
And I'll give you free background briefing, because when I was a presenter, I was handed a thick brief, like on the hard shoulder. I had 14 briefs to read, some of them 20 pages long. I would have 100 pages to read between 7 o'clock and 9 o'clock. You know what I mean? What goes into that brief?
Okay.
So, and therefore I would advise you, like say you're going on to debate something, and the researcher, you get all your good points in, because that will go in the brief, and the debate might go in your direction. You can actually control and manipulate the debate. So the conversations with the people you never see on air, like people who come to me and say, I want to get my client on such and such a show. And I'd say, look, it's very simple. I have a 50% success rate. I will recommend you, Pat, and I'll recommend your story, but the editors and the producers will decide.
Okay.
And therefore, the key people to befriend are the people who build the briefs, the people who do the research. And they say, so then something comes up on insurance or on Brexit or whatever, and they say, I know this guy, Pat Downs, and he's really helpful and he's really informative. And so slowly but surely you build it up. And then this is how Jim Power, the economist of Friends First.
We know Jim.
Well, that's how Jim did it. He targeted Today FM and he made himself available. Okay, so there's a complex 2-inch thick central bank report, ESRI predictions. I'll make it simple for you, because journalists don't have time to read all this. They don't have the expertise. So he'll make it simple for you, and he gives the questions. And then suddenly, shall I tell you what, Jim, we'll have you on yourself. And then you become a household name.
Well, reflecting as you draw breath there, and that was a powerful answer. I recall from my previous life, the ESB used to reflect when the Late Late Show was on, when the coffee break would be on. There was a spike always in the energy. You could measure it literally on the breaks, because people both make a cup of coffee. So it's your end as well in terms of the ad breaks. I suppose you raised an interesting point.
Can I just say on that was a long time ago. The fact of the matter is, the fragmentation of the media now means once you become your own best PR person, once you've actually got your message right, you can do this on a podcast, you can do this on a digital broadcast, but I need to give you the skills so that when they do engage with you, that you have impact. In other words, if you're just yada, waffling away, you don't have a clear point of view, you don't have a point of, like, what sells in this country?
Okay.
It is difference, not the same. So how are you different?
Well, that's, and I'm glad you brought up podcasting, because the man that was sitting in your seat this time last week, Joe Houghton, was doing a masterclass on podcasting, which is available to all our members, such as they'd like to take a look at it. You could do worse than throw your eye over it as well, Ivan.
Yes.
But I suppose you brought up an interesting point in terms of when you're in the field and you're deployed, okay, and the battle is on in the heat of battle, and you're what did the Queen famously say, when you're explaining, you're losing.
Yeah, I don't believe in that.
Well, okay, but things go wrong, and inevitably they do.
Yes, oh yes.
And there is that crisis that comes in all careers at some point of the compass, and you have that Joe Duffy moment, as I often say, in terms of Saturday morning, forgive me.
Yeah.
And the camera is stuck in your face, and the microphone is there, and Joe or Charlie Bird, maybe his predecessor, is there. I mean, what are the survival techniques?
Well, on the course, we go through Golfgate, Mariongate. People being photographed. People being photographed on top of a dead horse. People giving vaccine to the teachers of a school that their own kids go to. Yeah. I could go on. Davy stockbrokers, right?
The list is endless.
Yeah. No, there's about 4 or 5 a year that Prince Andrew, Maria Bailey, really.
Public
your career's over. Their career defining moments. And so therefore, I have a whole module that deals because everything else. This is how you sell yourself. This is how you grow. But now you're on the back foot. Okay. Well, first of all, I say that the media is only part of your problem here, right? So the first thing is Golfgate. Do you have the personal resilience to face this down? And some people say, you know what? Sean O'Rourke, I'm not going to fight this, I'm not going to lawyer up, I'm going to walk away. So do you have the resilience? The first question you've got to ask you before I even can help you. Second is, did you break the law? It's nothing is as clarifying moral compass as did you break the law? And the third is, no matter if you have a great explanation and there's mitigating, is your boss going to sack you? Anyway, okay. So if you jump those 3 hurdles, the boss is sort of on side. I actually didn't break the law. And you know what? Even if people think less of me and I'm going to have the legacy scars of this for life, like I faced with bankruptcy, you know what? I'm going to come through this. Now Ivan can help you, because the situation is that what you need to do is to go into a room with your closest, and ask yourself the meanest, the nastiest, the questions to which you don't have a good answer, right? Did you have sex with that woman, Bill Clinton? You know what I mean? You get to the really heart of the issue and you come up with your answers on those, right? Then what you need to do is, unlike Phil Hogan and Golfgate, you need to have one seminal event, not with one journalist, because that pisses off everybody else. One seminal event, like
that didn't work out well after Prince Andrew.
No, sorry. Prince Andrew the question is the law. Well, did he break the law? Okay. So if you've broken the law, you're actually maybe better to cut and run. So if you don't go through that, so then every story is going to have a beginning, middle, and end. Right? Okay, It will not go on. We will not be in the same space as this. So I advise people that at the point where it's at its highest, and that could be Micheál Martin getting up in the Dáil and saying there was no bank bailout. If you rectify that within 3 hours, say, I'm sorry, I misspoke, it was a mistake, all the air goes out of the balloon.
So 3 hours is your
No, that's for a minor thing.
Okay.
If it's a major thing, like someone robbed the money, like someone broke the law, or there's a really serious problem here. You made a compo claim that hasn't been sustained. What you need to do, we'll take Catherine Zappone. What Catherine Zappone should have done was this. Catherine Zappone should have invited, within a couple of weeks of her deciding not to take the job, on the height of the controversy, she should have invited everyone in the media to come to the Burlington Hotel or wherever, or to tune in. And she should have said, look, my story is that I've given a lifetime commitment to LGBT. I was the first public married woman in this country. On a career side, I have been Minister for Children, I've been a TD, and so on. Now I'm living in New York, and I actually live very close to the UN building, and there's 170 countries there. And one of the things that I noticed about the UN is there's quite a random basis that countries from Botswana to France have different envoys for different things, completely random things. And I was reflecting on my own ministerial experience and my own passion. And you know what? I made a huge mistake. Instead of texting Leo or former cabinet colleagues or Simon Coven, I should have written to the Secretary General of the Department of Finance and saying, I think it would be great if Ireland had an envoy on LGBT issues because of the constitutional change, because of the plebiscite and all that. And secondly, I think that with my ministerial experience, I could do this role. Is there any competition that you could run, if you're so minded, that I could enter for to be considered for this? And I made a huge mistake that I went around what was a very reasonable thing to do, because the remuneration was paltry. There wasn't a lot of ego or status with it. It was something I wanted to do in my life. And I completely put my hands up. Now, what she will have achieved is people will go away and say, yeah, I don't accept that. I agree with that. But what she has done, and she's never done one interview, she has now said, well, that's her story, that's her side of the story, and she admits this. That means when the legacy of Catherine's opponents decided, she will be considered in the round of that mistake, of finding redemption and moving on, and judged in the round of what she did as Minister for Children, what she did as her LGBT, and therefore my whole advice is, you cannot run away. If you run away and never engage, with the process, that will define you. And so far that, and all the media around town, all the PR advice say,
Okay, so
keep the head down, this will go away. It will go away. No, but you will never get this shaken off your indelible stain. So, for example, for me, right? So I faced a situation that I had been very high profile figure. I was a ministerial, former minister and so on. And I was faced with a situation that my business had been sold and had gone through the whole receivership process very successfully. But I was caught on a PG. I couldn't reach an agreement with the bank. And I said, look, I need to crystallize this. I looked at the 1860 legislation in Ireland, 12 years disqualification. And I said, and we were England, UK, we're in the EU, and I had shops in Wales and so on. And I did Sunderland University in Wales. And I said, I'm going to develop my own economy. I'm going to get in and out because the situation was that I needed to deal with this and move on with the rest of my life. So I came back to a storm of bankruptcy, tourism, poster boy, despicable, disgraceful, and banks and all this. So I held a press conference and I said, I want to talk about this. And I want to talk about my experience, because this isn't actually about Ivan. This is about the UK Insolvency Act 1986. And the day after I went to the court, because I declared myself bankrupt, this guy, George Field, the civil servant, sat me down and he said, just before, he said, I've never met you before. He said, shit happens. And he said, I don't know how you got here, but my job, he said, is to allow you a fresh start, because we believe you have some economic value as a human. And that is the way America and we look on this. So I, in my press conference, said, this isn't about Ivan. This is about changing the law so that any entrepreneur, subsequently through COVID or whatever, and I said, Enda Kenny and Alan Chatter need to get their head out of their ass and change the law here. And we need to move from Victorian values to saying this is a feature of business life and entrepreneurship, and there's a professional way to deal with it as we deal with corporate insolvency. And now you turn on the radio. I even saw a program in News Talk. Come to us if you have a financial problem, the ISI, the Irish Insolvency Service, and we'll give you a new future. So I changed the whole narrative, saying, this isn't about me. This is about, I could not, because the law in Ireland needs to be changed. So therefore, that's because I asked myself the meanest, nastiest questions.
Okay, I suppose that's the exception to the rule. And, to paraphrase De Valera in the year that's in it, hindsight, you would say, Sinead Fecker. And maybe Catherine Zbone is thinking that in hindsight, but is it too late for her?
Well, certainly, I'll put it like this. I think she would have saved Simon Coveney and the government a lot of trouble if she did it in August, right at the height of it, especially when she decided, that she wasn't going to go ahead with this and she stepped aside. That was the time to do it.
Okay, so there are moments.
You see, whereas Phil Hogan, where he went wrong was this. He should have done a press conference instead of talking to one journalist, and he should have said, right, I believe, and there are Eurocrats, both political and administrative, traveling all over the world during COVID. And the rule of thumb is that once you've got a test and you're negative, you're not a super spreader and you go. I made a huge mistake because I got a negative test. And yes, I went to Kildare and I went to Galway and I went to Limerick, I went to Roscommon. Whereas what Esther Van Deleen, and he didn't get his boss on side, right? The stakeholder thing, she said he wasn't fired because of COVID. He got fired because he changed his story. So you've got to,
Okay.
and you see what Zapone and the government did wrong and what Phil did wrong was, when you have your press conference, you must leave no meat left on the bone. In other words, what you have to do is there is no further. And so often people, when I'm going through this with them, they reveal, actually, there's something worse, Ivan. So you've got to be in the vanguard of actually putting this forward. Now, there's other things you need to do beyond media as well, like get into a process. So the lottery had the wrong prizes 3 years ago. So you appoint KPMG or some independent, but within 30 days to report on what went wrong and so on. So, you know.
Well, that's fine for medium and large scale, but for an SME, and to that point, I mean, we're talking about narrative here this morning and curating your personal narrative.
But this is actually defending the really tough thing. But like, as I say, most of what I'm talking about is actually defending, it's actually promulgating.
My takeaway from that would be, you know, and we were talking about it earlier, is that in a case like that, you're to get out ahead of it as early as possible and put your hands up and come as clean as possible.
I tell you how to apologize. I tell you, you know, there's
be a maxima culpa.
Well, the way it is this, that I can let you apologize in a way.
Apology.
Well, no, absolutely. But the trade-off is contrition for redemption. But I can flip a thing so you're not accepting my apology. So in other words, there are clever ways, and you can also you can choreograph things where people do accept your apology and you get a headwind back. But that sometimes means, like I go through Frank Dunlop in the witness box in the tribunal and how he got out of jail by, you know, the judge said, would you go home, Mr. Dunlop, and think about what you're...
Well, as a case in point at the moment in the media, if you look at Boris Johnson, which is an interesting, there'll be PhDs written about that particular career over the last certainly 12 months. But one of the things I see coming back to pulse the whole time is, for example, last week, I think it was, he made some comments about the Labour leader in terms of a particular case, which was found to be untrue and so on. But he has yet to come out and apologize. So actually, the sense of it is that the fact that he hasn't apologized is probably bigger than the actual event itself now.
Yeah.
So
well, sorry, there's a couple of things going on there. First of all, I have to say straight up, someone somewhere needs to change the narrative about all of the lockdown events. I mean, like you take the hurling final.
But the chief of staff was on this morning going on about the army situation in the Key Barracks.
Yeah. The situation is this. All of these parties, whether they're in 10 Downing Street, whether they're in the Connemara Coast Hotel, it is, and you know, outside the All Ireland or whatever hurling final, it is absolutely normal behavior. So let's start with the thing that this was disgraceful. I mean, I honestly think that in years to come, we will look back at this. I mean, by all means, fire Boris over Brexit, fire Boris over cost of living, fire him over everything. But Partygate is a bottle of smoke, in my opinion. Partygate is something that you've actually got to change the narrative. Because, you know, I now blunt.
Would you contend that that might be a parochial opinion?
No. I would actually say that we're going to reach, like I said, within a week of this, everyone's got to manage their own COVID. You know, if you're a 90-year-old and you're got double pneumonia, you managing your risk compared to someone up the street going to Copperface Jacks is completely different. And you know what? And the whole thing of living with COVID, I think lockdown was a disaster. I think that it caused a lot more damage than the virus ever caused. And I actually think you need to change the entire narrative. And the sooner that people start talking about the real issues, which are now coming back onto it and picking to do with the Defence Force and nothing. But I honestly think that, you know, Partygate and all this thing, there's going to have to be someone say, you know what, we need to let this go.
Okay, well, that's a fairly strong point. And
but sometimes the strong point is changing the narrative.
Well, talking about changing the narrative and actually creating the narrative, the matter at hand in terms of media masterclass and your own particular unique skill set. A small consultancy practice, okay, they've never been heard of, although they're uber niche in their area, and they want to kind of build their media profile, generally speaking, and I suppose just ramp up their presence, be it virtual, be it print, be it whatever. What steps do they need to get in the door? And you've been on the other side of the door. Well, we touched on it earlier. More specifically.
Well, I put it like this. I have to say that a lot of people, you know, in every walk of life, including management consultants, advisors, and they say, this is what we do, and so on. I actually give people an absolute boot camp punishment beating and say, sorry, Pat, I know 20 people who do that, right? In other words, what is it that you actually do? Is
Uber
it
niche.
the uber niche in terms of actually, I treat this client as if I had skin in the game myself. I really care. I really empathize beyond just having another invoice every month.
Sure.
Or the location that I'm in, or my tech background in this, or my fiduciary background, or my corporate governance background, or my accounting background means that I can apply this to particular sets of problems. And I actually am the best in the country at this. In other words, people, and this applies to individuals and applies to corporate brands, right? They actually don't drill down deep enough. You know, and I'd like to, when I have politicians on the course,
USPs.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And secondly, what baggage you carry. Like, so I get politicians. So I say, politicians, everyone assumes you're a waffler, you're the chancellor, you're a liar, you're expedient, and all these kinds of, but I say, why should I vote for you? And you'd be amazed at people. Like, that's a pretty fundamental, not vote for your party colleague, vote for you, Pat. And the way it is this, they never actually thought of that. How do they add voter value?
I would say there is an exception to the rule. By definition, management consulting is kind of fairly niche in terms of the elevator statement. So most of the profession that will be on here have a very specific niche and they have an elevator statement. So
well,
if you have that,
can I give an example? Yeah. Can I give an example for myself? So the situation was that I was approached to do with Claire Byrne the News Talk breakfast show, and I had no background in media whatsoever. And very quickly, you know, they said to me, actually, this is not about communication. This is about point of difference. And they said, imagine you're speaking to a 32-year-old female solicitor in Arklow, a professional person, or it could be in Ballincollig. And you know what? On RT, the news is going to be the same. The debate is going to be more or less the same. The guests could be actually identical if you're lucky, because sometimes they're getting lesser guests. So we want you to answer the question, how are you going to add listener or viewer in the case of television value? So I had to find ways that what would come out of my mouth would never come out of Anya Lawler, Claire Byrne's mouth, or Mary McCallum, right? And I had to think of ways that I could slag the politicians, the way that I could turn to camera and say, this is what they said, but this is what they're thinking, because I used to be one of them. Or I could, you know, like I was on with Chris Dunham.
But that's the poet you're
turning. No. This is really subtle, because I would say that who is co-presenting a program that would savage their co-presenter? Like I would say to Chris Dunham, and I would have this, so you're not able to dress yourself in the mornings, I have to dress you. And I'd say, when is your internship up? You know what I mean? Like, you know, in other words, absolutely insulting behavior. So, or I could slag the guests, or I'd start the program by giving an 8-minute rant about, we just take Partygate. You know what I mean? In other words, right, I never thought about that. That's a point of view that's completely contrary, and that could be on any topic.
But Ivan, in fairness,
so no, but the point I'm trying to make, all of those questions go to what came out of my mouth, because I was adding value, because they're going to get the news anyway. And the same with the management consultant. You've got to say, what is actually my point of difference? Not what it says on the brass plate. And what is the drill down? And once you get this right, and sorry, the second thing I teach is, once you've got the content that we engage with, please don't take 6 sentences to say what needs to be said. Like Oscar Wilde, you know, his famous quote, his best quote was, I want to apologize to you, Pat, for writing a long letter. I didn't have the time to write a short letter. I am into writing short letters. I am into saying to people, I'll give you 1 sentence to explain, you know, what Lionheart Consulting does. Only 1 sentence. And by God, have you got to put a lot of work into that. And therefore, once, and I advise people not to have pages and pages, to have their facts and figures, but in their head. But the key message, to refine it down. And then, okay, even I get that.
Okay. Well, my wife would tell me, Ivan, that no is a full sentence.
Yeah, no can be a very big sentence.
Yeah. So, I mean, to that end.
And when you're saying no, say a big no.
Okay. So, well, I'm saying yes here, but I mean, okay, you have a very dynamic personality, which is self-evident, and that's a gift in of itself in terms of communication. Not all people are gifted with that particular skill set. So, you know, a management consultant is on the media and so on, and might not have the dynamic communication skills. So say, for instance, he or she is on on the spot and they're having a chat and they're talking to Anya or Mary or Sean or whatever. When they're on air, what techniques? I mean, for your average mortal like myself, who isn't gifted with your
let's start with the thing. Daz is not kind of white. It's stunningly, scintillatingly white, right?
Okay.
So the first thing you've got to do is, good morning, Anya, is energy. If you are not passionate about what you do, if you don't believe you're the best management consultant, if you don't believe that you can change the life of your client, how's anyone else going to do it? So I'm sorry. You've got to do an Oscar-winning performance of energy, which costs nothing, of passion, of having distilled the message that you actually believe this, and that is contagious.
So that's a pre-locker room practice.
Oh, no, it's absolutely. So once you got the content, so absolutely, you've got to, the way you rehearse it is that maybe you thought of something spiky to say about people who don't avail of your services. In other words, that's almost a little bit confrontational. So therefore, I for example, I did a program of 18 programs, the Green Room was on a Friday night. And the press officer in Virgin Media said, look, I've lined up 3 calls for you to speak to tabloids to promote the program. And look, we'd have a former retired sports star, Ronnie Whelan, Roger Mayer, and we had a Mimic and Paddy Power sponsorship. And I knew they'd have no more interest in this than the man in the moon. And this was right in the middle of the worst of the lockdown, this time last year, the 2-kilometre rule. And I said, what am I going to say to Sandra Mallon and Ken McSweeney and these people? So then I said to myself, you know what, Ivan? Friday night, at home, a glass of wine in hand. I happened to watch the last 3 late shows, and they had consecutively a woman who lost her husband through COVID, Barry McGuigan who lost a daughter, and really, it was. And I said, Sandra, I don't know if you've been watching the late show Friday night. She said, absolutely misery porn. You know, it's almost scripted now, this tear-jerking moment. And I said, I'm wondering, I said, on a Friday night, so I have nothing against serious analysis of COVID or anything, but on a Friday night, is this national entertainment? Hey, watch the Green Room and we'll give you a laugh and all the rest of it. So Yates slams LLS porn, misery porn. In other words, that is a way of being provocative about selling something that is not that saleable. So in other words, people who don't avail of my services, this is the type of problems they end up with. You know what I mean?
So that's and it's not an adding value piece.
But it's a communicable way of making it interesting. Because what is all drama? It's conflict.
Okay, so I mean, just continuing on that trend in terms of when you're on screen and you're in the moment, how do you add value?
Well, first of all, let's be clear. This program is not your program. You are there. So first of all, I get you prepared. What are the questions they're going to ask me? And Claire Byrne once said to me, no matter what's an issue, a road traffic accident, a bomb, a scandal, a sex scandal, the BBC training, what happened, who, where, why, when, and then why.
The 5 Ws.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what they're going to ask you. So, but sorry, what I teach you is we're here to sell the IMCA this morning. So what we'll do is we'll answer those questions, but I'll quickly train you. Yes, you will answer the question.
So you can pivot within a question.
But you pivot in one sentence, so it looks seamless. But you do not pivot straight to what you want to talk about.
So
you must answer the question.
Ask you, give us a working example.
Put it like this. I mean, it depends on what you're selling. But if I've come on to speak about, okay, so we'll just take something that I'm Minister for Housing, and you're asking me to explain how rents are gone up, and I've got Owen O'Brien beside me. You know what I mean? I will answer the question. COVID, planning problems, a delay, but there will be 32,000 houses built this year, which is a multiple of what. But what I will say this is that 12 billion will be spent on housing this year, on new housing. 4 billion of that is from the state. And if Owen O'Brien is minister, that 4 billion will go up. But there's 8 billion spent by the private sector. What will happen to that when he's minister? and they don't see any economic return. Total housing expenditure go down. So please don't be taken in. Now that is just a case in point, Jack, where you answered the question, which is what's happening about housing supply, but you pivoted to what you really want to say. You think things are bad with me. People are putting forward populist panaceas. I'll give you, I'll diss them.
So that's, I suppose, an old political trick, and I suppose we would see that a lot on the media.
It's a very new political trick because a lot of them aren't very effective communicators. Insofar as that you've got to actually, again, condensing it down. And that was just off the top of my head, an example, but like you have your agenda, and absolutely. So you have your parry answers to the question. And you know that can be an excuse, or it can be a thing. But the point is this: you've worked out. This is what this is your chance to shine. This is your chance to sell yourself. And most media, if you do it in an entertaining and engaging way that's relatable. So I say, cut out all jargon. So, like I talk to people in the health service and they talk about CHOs. What are CHOs? People talk about multi-annual funding. People don't talk, and so you cut out all jargon and all process.
So how about positioning, Ivan, in terms of the personal and the corporate? So do you talk about kind of the IMCA? Do you talk about PAT, or how do you sugar that or pepper that into the
depends what you're selling, and B, who your target audience is. For example,
should you have a strategy?
Well, you see, there you go. Because I just see what often people do. The consultants, they say, well, we've been called in by Keach, our board of Mona, here to review this situation. And what we've now done is we've set up a 3-year strategy. We've set up a committee to give oversight to this. We've appointed a liaison officer, and we're going to do periodic reviews. Would you go and F off it yourself? Not one of that is relatable to ordinary people. So if we're talking about sustainability and the environment, I've talked about, well, we're actually now changing the whole park and ride system so that people use public transport. This is where we're putting the car parks. We're actually putting solar panels on every building, and we want you to put them on your buildings, your corporate buildings.
Sure.
We're actually changing recycling. Now we're going to take paint and things like that we never did before. In other words, this is all relatable to ordinary people, because the question you've got to ask yourself is, anyone watching this, your target audience, how does this benefit me? You're yada talking shop. So cut out all jargon and cut out all process.
Okay, to that point, I suppose corporately, you see ESG is a big mega trend at the moment.
Yeah, I hate acronyms. I hate, is it the environmental? Is it the social? Is it the governance? I mean, all of that is just a way, and it's all jargon. And this is a huge mistake consultants make. Every time a politician or an administrator or a civil servant speaks in any type of shorthand, you're actually physically disengaging. You know what? I'm going to switch over this.
The whole sustainability agenda is a major trend at the moment. Okay, to your point, and I agree with you. TLAs are the 3-letter abbreviation by debt, are a curse. But just as a case in point, I mean, in terms of PR disasters and thinking about it, so a lot of corporates go out to major conferences, and you can think of someone in Europe. Okay, so for example, the big corporates often arrive in private jets.
Yeah.
Okay, but they're there to talk about sustainability.
Yeah.
Okay, so how do you deal with that sort of PR disaster? So Bill Gates arrives in to preach about sustainability, or our Minister for the Environment. I'm not saying he or she does, but they go over in the government jet. Now, actually, I think in fairness, they took the boat. But just as a case in point to COP26. Yeah. Okay. A lot of them arrived over in private jets. Now they can argue the thesis on security and stuff like that. Yeah. But how do you? Well, I mean,
this is the deep dive I'm talking about.
Okay.
So when you're doing your deep dive, you ask yourself, well, am I actually a hypocrite? Am I actually, so leaving aside the media and everything, am I actually a hypocrite? And if the answer to that is yes, do something about it. In other words, so I mean, there must be.
But that's
no, this is absolutely predictable. The amount of people who say, oh, and I would see people, for example, I'm doing profile interviews of people, and I'd say, I actually do 46-minute interview for the Thursday interview every week. And I'd ask people the same questions every week. And so who's the biggest influence on your life when you were a child? What did you want to be when you grew up? What's your most embarrassing moment? What's your most shocking thing that happened to you in your life? And they actually start thinking about this. as if it was the first time there. I train people that they actually not only have the answer to that, but even if they're not asked those questions, they're ready to go, because this is how you get charisma. This is how you become a colourful person, because I have all these anecdotes lined up. And I have stories about my war stories, about my political career. So therefore, what I'm saying, preparation is absolutely pivotal, that you actually have to think about all these things. Well, and therefore, when I say being on message, means, yeah, I'm glad even you didn't ask me about, what did I want to do as a child. I'm going to tell you that because it's an interesting story.
So Ivan, I mean, we could talk about this all morning, and it's been wonderful, but I will leave you with two questions for you, okay? And thank you. And we will be recording this and sending it out, folks, later to the members. And I'm sure if there's any burning platforms or questions that people want to ask, email us in and we'll pass them on to Ivan, who may...
or maybe enroll in the course and you get the full dose.
Be cheap at half the price. So I'll leave you with the two questions we've been asking. Yeah. So we've gone through a pandemic. And a lot of our consultants actually are in business continuity planning, and they would say they never saw a pandemic in that, planes falling from the sky, all those things. So two quick questions for you. You've lived through it. It's been an extraordinary period in everyone's life. It's been a universal experience. What one thing have you learned during this period, this 24 months, that you didn't know before?
Lockdown is for losers. That remote working
that's fine, but
remote working doesn't really work.
Have you learned remote working doesn't really work? So
doesn't really work. I mean, there's this illusion that it's fantastic, and it's if you're a young parent, it's absolutely fantastic. If you're a commuter, it's absolutely fantastic. Is it really good for the business? I don't think so.
Okay. So
in other words, but sorry, I've given you two views that are totally contrarian. But the thing about them is they're interesting because you don't hear people saying that,
but on a personal basis.
Yes, on a personal. Yeah. What I learned.
Personally,
what I learned was I went in the middle of lockdown on a retirement planning course because I was 61 and so on, and basically went through nutrition, actuarial, all the things. And this guy said to me, and you fill out this psychological assessment. It's a one-to-one. What made you happy in your life? Was it travel? Was it kids? Was it a sense of achievement? Was it money? Was it power? What was it? And what do you want to do with your bucket line? And the guy said to me at the end, this is what I learned about myself to answer your question. And he was actually Pat Kenny's brother, Paul, in the retirement planning council. He said, Ivan, do you mind if I say something to you? I said, sure, fire away. And he said, 4% of people are congenitally not suited to retirement. And he said, I've dealt with hundreds of people through this course. You're at the very top of that course, but you go off and get yourself an effing job. And so what I learned about myself is that I'm only happy when I have the Mount Everest stuck right in front of me and someone says, this can't be done.
Okay, well, as we're in the foothills of the Himalayas this morning, clearly, the second point of that question, I suppose, having come through the pandemic and you've gone through that course and you've had earnings, and I would probably, quoting my beloved wife, she would say, happiness is transitive, try and seek contentment.
Hey, exactly, I agree with that.
But the other question is that the other one learning, what one thing have you learned that you'll take forward with you? What discipline, perhaps, that you hadn't got or received?
Well, put it like this. The truth of it is that doing the masterclass was like starting over. Okay. So I had a really successful political career, really successful time in business, and really successful time in broadcasting. I actually love the challenge of starting over again. And what's made me most content is actually the striving part of it. And therefore, what I would say to people is, don't be afraid of change. Embrace it and challenge yourself.
On that chameleon note, Vermeil Maga, it's been wonderful this morning. And thank you.
And I wish you every continued success in the IM and the Institute and the IMCA.
Well, we look forward to seeing you again. And thanks very much for listening, folks. And we'll be talking to you now. God bless. Good day. And we said we'd have you out at 11:30, and I think we're on the nose. Take care.